we're trying to hit that fine balance of starting on time and not rushing you so you continue to feel welcome today. So it's a fine balance, but he's been very kind to us. Alright, good afternoon. No, I should say, it feels like afternoon, it's still morning, isn't it? We've crammed a day's worth of content into a morning so that you can enjoy the wonderful weather this afternoon in a nice walk somewhere. Oh, there you are, sporting fixtures are queuing up. My name's Mike North. I am the Children's and Young People's Advisor for the Diocese, so it's my delight and joy to remind us all that young people and children are part of the church. Amen? Amen. You know, I don't often say amen and get a response. It's very alive of you all. Can I ask, and this isn't to embarrass any newcomers, but to raise a hand if you have ever had a child or young person come into your church. Right, you have just committed yourselves to listen very carefully for the next 25 minutes in the hope that we might together learn a little bit about how we might welcome children and young people and their families, of course, into our church. It's been mentioned a few times, and I'll try not to replicate, as is the temptation when you have 5 different people talking about welcome. It's like having 5 sermons on welcome. Let's hope they're all a little bit different, or else we'll drift off. So we've all had children and or young people into our church, and I wonder if you have ever asked the question, what do the children see? Some of you have, which is a great start, but some of you might not have done, because often children come in a smaller version to adults, and so a child's eye view of your church can be a really interesting experiment to do. A video camera is a great way. Hold a video camera and walk around, come into your church and see what happens. Or get on your knees, but that would kill, wouldn't it? Or even a wheelchair. Those that would go around at a lower level in your church, I wonder what that feels like. Do you have a coffee hatch which is high up? Do you have pews that you couldn't see over? Do you have things happening at a higher level, or do you have things lower down? One of the ways that we can welcome children is to put things that are appropriate and interesting for children at their level. A lot of churches have pillars, most churches have walls, and you could think about, well, what does my church look like at a level of just 3 foot high? Do I have pictures, posters, things that engage children around in my church? Or is all the decoration very adult and at adult eye level? We often think, when we think church, how are we feeding the adults and how are we helping the adults engage with worship? And sometimes the very important question is, do we care for the children as well as we care for the adults? Sometimes we think about children as sort of the special cases. Well, what could we do for the kids? Make sure that they're still engaged and that they're getting something out of the service. And we think that's a good thing to say. Maybe some of you are like, well, that's what we say. But we don't talk about our adults like that. Well, what do we make? We better make sure that the adults get something. Or maybe you do think as a secondary. Do we think about children as the secondary most important people in our church after their parents or grandparents and other ages? Or do we see church as one family? So we place equal importance as to the children, the young people, their parents and their grandparents' age. Do we consider them all when we're thinking about how we do church, how we make church look? Do our churches look like museums, or do they look like play pits? Or is there a happy medium? I'd like to see it. Sometimes I ask this kind of question, and there's not an obvious answer. Because some people would say, well, of course, our church service is the right place. We would like to see children and young people in our service. But it is a good question to ask in today's world. Is it the right place? Are the needs of the children and the young people the same as that of the adults? The answer is a very easy no. They're at a different stage in life, different development, different understandings. They need different things. And yet I'm a big believer in all-age worship, and intergenerational worship, where we can worship and enjoy fellowship together in all ages. But it is an important question to ask when we're thinking about reaching out. Is this the right place to draw children and families into? Or are we willing to change to become the right place for children and families to come to? It's one thing being welcoming and opening the doors, advertising on a website, lots of welcoming people at the door, and then the content of our services misses the children or misses the families. So it's a good question to ask, because it either forces us to reconsider the shape of our services, or it helps us to think, should there be something else at another time, and even in another place, that is still a part of our church and where we can meet the needs of children and young people better. Now, I can already feel in the room that there'll be a difference of opinion there. There are some churches that I work with who are so adamant that the right thing to do is that people will come on a Sunday morning. Well, surely they're running that group over there so that eventually we will see them in here, filling up the church on a Sunday morning. I would challenge you and ask you the question, is it the right place? And if you would like it to be the right place, how can you make it so? How can the shape of your services become suitable? I spend a lot of my time working with youth workers and children's workers on this question. And I'm sure you've all thought about it, or at least I hope you have. Because in many ways, good news to people is when you meet their needs. Good news to the blind person in the New Testament was receiving sight when Jesus healed. Good news to the hungry people sat on the hillside listening was to be fed. The gospel is good news wherever you are. We shouldn't have to convince somebody that something is good news, should we? It's either good news to somebody or it isn't. So when we find ourselves trying to convince people, well, our church is friendly to children, and we do know that they come and they're part of our family, you should come, it is good news. It may or may not be good news to somebody, but good news is good news. If we were to say in your packs there's a cheque for £100 made out personally to each of you, you might think, well, that's quite good news. Thank you. I'll take that. Or maybe not. You're not very excited about that. Just as well we didn't bother doing it. Good news is good news. And when we understand the needs of people and we meet those needs, we become good news to people. We are the gospel. So I wonder what you think the needs of children and young people are. Any suggestions? A bit of interaction. He's asking us a question. I'm sure I'm comfortable. Oh, now we're relaxed. I'd like to be involved. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Be a part of it and not a separate part. They're part of what's going on. They're not
It's a big challenge, isn't it?
with the same focus.
To feel part of something, we're all a part of it, not that they're taken out and done something separate to, although that happens in many churches, in mine also. What else are the needs of children and young people?
To be heard.
To be heard. I should have had a microphone at this point so you could hear, but to be heard, listened to. Are our children and young people listened to? Are their voice valued?
The attention span is less than an adult, so it needs to be segments so they can understand.
Right, so if we're going to make children and young people welcome, we're going to meet their needs, we need to keep things short and snappy. Attention spans aren't necessarily very long, although sometimes on the right activity you can keep a child amused for many hours, more so than the adults who start to fidget and complain, when's the coffee coming or something. So yes, anything else?
Sometimes they can leave.
And then almost pictures fit into
They need to see that the adults are engaged and taking part as well. They don't want to necessarily be patronised and just give them something for them and think, well actually church obviously isn't for my mum and dad, it's just for me. Something that is all embracing. There's another one at that.
Some of them can lead as well.
Some of them can lead. Some young people and children are desperate to get up and try something. If they see something happening in your church, there might be something in them, well, I could have a go at that. I'd like to have a go at that. I would love somebody to show me how to do that. And do we open those doors or not?
Do we know the names of our young people?
Do we know their names, or are they just so-and-so's kids? Do we know their names? Do we take the time to value and find out? And as I have some wonderful, lovely friends in York who every time we visit them as a family, the first people they meet, they get down and they say hello to my children by name. And then it's, hello Mike, how are you? I love that. I love that welcome of the children first. Yes?
Maybe participating in communion.
You're just opening up candles. Participating in communion. Yes. And there'll be another workshop on that another day. Accepting children to communion, potentially before confirmation, things like that. But that's all part of the colour of the diocese. Yes?
We have a lot of kids with ADHD, so making sure that the refreshments are appropriate and that they have some space to move as well.
Okay, so children with ADHD or other special needs that you feel, are we meeting their needs? Are we providing enough provisions? Are there toilets and drinks breaks available? Are people free to move around? Are all important. Okay, you're doing good thinking, church. This is good. Also about our worship, the shape of our worship. Do we use lots of words, or do we use images? Do we use props? Grant had his A-board here to show actually props are a wonderful visual way of learning. Do we have screens? Are we able to have video screens and things as part of the shape of our worship? Because the needs of children and young people, or maybe their expectations of church, could be very different from what we've known church traditionally to be. A child's world in today's world is very different from when you or I grew up. School, I tell you, looks completely different. If you've not been in a school lately, you'll be amazed. I'm amazed. I'm 42. It's been a while since I was in school, but even that gap, which is shorter than a lot of yours, I can tell. School, it's official. School has changed. Doesn't work like it used to. No way. School has changed, and therefore children's expectations of things that they go to are changed. Okay? We could spend the rest of the day on that, but I'm not going to. I'm glad it's opened the lid of your minds a little bit. Now, I want you, bless his heart, that's such a sad picture. I'd like you, if you really have the confidence to tell the person next to you or around you, describe your church to them as if they were a child, as if you wanted them to come. Because it might be quite telling of how confident you are of your church and what happens on a Sunday morning, let's say. Is it somewhere that's very easy to invite a child to because there's lots there? Or will it be a difficult experiment because you have to try and sell a half-an-hour sermon to them? Dare you have a go? Just in twos or threes where you're sat. Describe your church service as if the person you're talking to is a child and you're trying to invite them to come. Okay. I'm going to call time on that. while you sing those songs. Then you need to listen to somebody talk for a long time. And if you need the toilet, well, there is one. It's kind of all the way down a dark corridor, out the door and across to the hall, and well, you'll need to get a key. Hopefully that wasn't your experience, but it is some of our experiences, that what we have currently is not a good set for children and young people, and so our challenge is, of course, is to look at that and how can we improve the welcome of our churches to include children and young people, and not just those who will be dragged whether they like it or not, but those who would actually find your church good news. We talk about trying to keep our children, don't we, when they get to the age of 9, 10, 11, 12. Can we keep them? Well, if your church is good news, then they will want to. Church will be better than the dance club or football or whatever if they have good friendships and good activities and engaging things where life is renewed and enriched and they love coming because they are loved and they belong. Then you won't have a problem keeping your children and young people. They will want to come, as I hope we will do. Is this all too much? Is this too much focus on children? Is it too much? Why should children always become that trump card and we feel a bit guilty? Surely the adults and the elderly and other groups are also important. Yes, they are. Oh, but Jesus actually did bring the child into the centre at one point and said, hang on, we do need to be like these people to enter the kingdom of God. Mark said it at the beginning, others have mentioned the value that God puts on our children. And they are our inheritance. They are the church of today and also the church of tomorrow. They can be the leaders of today and are more likely to be the leaders tomorrow. So I do think, and it's why I do what I do, children are really, really important in God's eyes. Just one or two other little pointers before this session finishes. I wonder if you've ever thought about the facilities in your church and what might be needed by children and or young people who come. And I've never really had this thought before, which I'm admitting to you, but the young people in our church would really like a bank of PowerPoints to plug in their devices that they will use throughout the service. And some of you who've been tweeting today, whether your batteries are running low or not, maybe you've sat next to a PowerPoint in the church, but maybe that's an idea. Maybe there should be a space where, feel free to plug in and charge up. The top middle picture there, somewhere to play, and it's a picture of a massive Noah's Ark and some little cars. I don't know whether that's suitable or right for your church, but that would be good news to my kids. If I said, oh, there's somewhere to play, then that would be good news, part of the good news. I'm not saying it's the whole package, because we don't want to just entertain, we want to do church. But what would look good? Maybe some of the adult, I like to play, it's great being a father. You get to go in all the play places that weren't really there when I was young. Somewhere to change, if you've got good facilities, you're not expecting parents to change babies on pews or on the floor somewhere in a back room, but you have facilities that are clean and well looked after. Bottom left image there, I've got somewhere to engage, and I've got some young people there. Young people like to interact. We had somebody said interact and participate. If your services are all observation based, as in you come, you sit, you observe, you join in by singing and thinking. They're very passive, joining in things. How about analysing your services? How much of your services can people actually input into and engage? Are you asking questions, expecting people actually to answer and have a voice and be heard? Are there activities that the children and young people could do and be involved with in the church? Not just to keep them busy, but that are part of the church's life. And some of the other activities that your church might be involved with outside of a Sunday morning, are the children invited into those activities? Can they come and be part of the clean-up that you do around your area, or part of the coffee morning that you put on? Or do you always do things in school time and say, well, we can't because they're kids and there's a child protection issue there, isn't there? We can't do that. Well, you can. It just means you need to work harder to get those doors open for children to be involved. We have a few comfy seats in our church to the side, where if you're young or if you're a mum, you tend to grab those seats. The rest of it, well, they're not too bad, are they, Mark? They're padded seats, at least in our church. But do you have some more comfortable areas for mothers with babies who might just need a little bit of extra comfortable space to get a bag of activities out and spread out a little bit? And the last one there, sorry, it's not the clearest picture, but somewhere to belong. And there's a picture of all ages there relating and belonging together. And that's a facility, if you like, that you can offer a sense of belonging. In your packs, there is a list of questions on a sheet of A4, which I think it's on white paper, is it? Looks something like that. It's not the most exciting document to look at. However, it is a piece of paper that I would recommend help you go through a journey in your own churches to look at the welcome of children and young people. And it simply asks you a good number of questions, and hopefully the answers to those questions will help you to think through the issues. And maybe that's something that you can commit as PCCs or small working groups in your churches to think, how can we take this on? What can we do? We need a little working group that will actually work and make something happen and change. What can we do